Welcome to Sports Save My Life. My name is Clayton Freck, and I'm the CEO and founder of Angel City Sports. We know the power of sport to change and in some cases save lives. We hear these compelling stories every day, and we created this show to share them with the world. Enjoy the show, and remember to like, follow, share, and comment. All right, welcome to Sports Save My Life. Today, I am honored to sit down with my friend, fellow disability advocate, and three-time Paralympian in wheelchair basketball, Darlene Hunter. She was born and raised in Walled Lake, Michigan, on the outskirts of Detroit. She acquired a spinal cord injury at the age of 4 and was an accomplished wheelchair racing athlete and even attended University of Arizona on a track scholarship. She ended up winning a gold medal at the Rio Paralympic Games and recently won a bronze at the Tokyo Games in wheelchair basketball. We're going to talk about that transition from track to basketball. She graduated from the University of Arizona in 2004 with a degree in psychology. She got a master's degree, I believe, at the University of Texas, Arlington in social work in 2006, and then went on to get a PhD in family studies from Texas Women's University. She's currently a professor at University of Texas, Arlington. She's a huge advocate for women in their participation in the sport of wheelchair basketball. She has probably one of the top women's wheelchair basketball camps out there. And what I love most about Darlene is that she always answers the phone or the email. And I know when I send her an athlete in the greater Texas area, she's going to take care of them and be a great guide and mentor for them. So just nice to have sort of a trusted pair of hands down in the Lone Star State. Darlene, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I love about this community is that we could call each other up and be like, here's my kid in this state, and we're all willing to help out. So that's what's special about us, I think.
It is. Maybe we need to start like a formal little like network that we, work on a WhatsApp or something. Okay, first question. What comes to mind for you personally when you hear the title of our show, Sports Save My Life?
So I just think that sports does save your life in any capacity. I think it gives you a built-in social support, an emotional place to be, right? For me as a disabled athlete, when I was growing up, I was the only one in my school. I was the only one in my community. I was the only one. And I tell people, Americans with Disability Act happened in 1990. I got hurt in 1986. So I got hurt at a time where there wasn't rights for us. People for education, luckily we did, but for, navigating public spaces, not so much. Yeah. And so there was a lot of battles that we had to do as a kid, just because we didn't have those rights. My mom had to advocate. I was on the middle school track team, but couldn't be on the high school track team at that time. And it's really
That's
interesting,
crazy.
Right? Yeah, I had two amazing history professors, Mr. Meyer and Mr. Penrod, who was like, we're going to blaze through all of this for you and you're going to be a part of it. And then I got to high school and those track coaches were like, nope, we're not going to handle this. We're not doing this. Right.
Oh my gosh.
And so, it depended on people and not so much rights at that time. And
but I feel like even though the rights are sort of there underlying it, we're still in that same game of having to rely on people's willingness to include our kids.
In Michigan, there's a huge push right now for track and field to even be included right now by the state. Yeah. So we're fighting that battle still 20 something years later.
Yeah, I know. I feel like it's sort of like guerrilla warfare. It's like street by street, block by block.
Absolutely.
It's not, the big policies aren't really changing the world too much. So where do you think, who would you be without sport?
So with me, I wouldn't have done probably half of the things. Like when people say, hey, what would you do? Like, what do you think you would have done if you didn't do Paralympics? And I go, I don't know, because sports for me was such a tool in my life. Right. So I started at 7, and I have done sports ever since. And by 16, I was doing USA level stuff, like for junior nationals, going to Australia.
You don't know any other life at all.
I don't. And it provided me like a tool for education. So the most recent degree, so I have one that I haven't added yet because I just got it, was a master's in public health, but I got it so I could continue to train for Tokyo. So I went to UTA and was on the women's team there, and got another degree so that I could train every day with them and train for Tokyo. Right. So like for me, sports has been a tool for all of that. And then it gave me the opportunity to have a voice, right? Like as an advocate, it taught me how to advocate for my own rights. As a youth, it gave me role models that I knew that I could have a family and children. I could get an education, job, employment, right? Like we look at the employment rate and without sports, right? We have like 18%. And Mike Cottingham did this research. And with sports, it goes up to 64% employment rate for people with disabilities who participate in sports. So we see that sports is a tool for so much. And for me, it really did provide me everything I have. It provided me travel. It provided me education. It provided me advocacy, and it provided me my personality. Like, I don't know what I would be like without being like this feisty person that's like, this is not fair all the time. Right. Like, but I love like having it because now I get to tell the next generation, like, here, I'm getting old and now you get to advocate on my behalf. And so there's more people in the world that know that their rights and what they want in the world is useful.
That's really beautiful. You're so eloquent. Really, really eloquent. Okay, so let's start with childhood. Let's start with pre-disability and just set that up for me. What was the family structure like? You're in this. I looked on the map. It looks like a really small town in Michigan. Maybe you're close to Detroit, but it looks really small. Did you have siblings? Like, what was the family structure like?
So I was an only child. And then when I got hurt at 4, my brother was 6 months old at the time. So for the first 4 years of my life, like my brother came the last 6 months. Right. So it's an interesting story about when I got hurt. It was my mom put the last picture in the photo album for my Halloween. I got hurt in November. So October 31st, our Halloween was the last page of the photo album. And then I got hurt, and it was just like that chapter was closed in our family because it was a photo album of all of my walking pictures and then wheelchair on. So it's an interesting, like, kind of like,
so did your mom start like a new album, or it was just
was just the last page of that album?
Okay.
Isn't it freaky? Like
that is trippy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, so I was I ran around. We had I was that powered Jeep girl, right? That automatic at 3 was driving with the pedals. And so when I got hurt at 4, my mom basically pointed at the wheelchair and said, that's what you're going to be using every day. And that was the end of the story. Like, we didn't have much other conversation. She goes, that's just how life's going to be. You're going to be great at it and everything's going to work out. And so,
well, hold on. I want to back up to disability, but how do you think your mom knew to say it that way? How did she? Because I think about this a lot, right? Sorry.
She fakes it until she makes it.
But it's so beautiful because I say a lot, when you're matter of fact about disability, it just takes all the crap out of the conversation. It's just, it's just a thing, right? You grew up in Michigan, you had an injury, it's like, makes it no big deal. And then it allows, I think, people to talk about it a little more.
So my mom has this mantra that she tells all parents of raising kids with disabilities to sit on your hands. The least that you do for your kids, the better off they are. And we tend to coddle people with disabilities because parents are like, oh, I feel so bad. They're already struggling enough. And it makes it worse, to be honest, going back to your point. Like, the more you could just say, look, you're going to figure it out. And my mom said, so when I got hurt, we lived in a tri-level. So when you walked in the front door, you either went upstairs or downstairs. And we didn't have the money to move and the resources at that time to move, right? So my wheelchair sat outside for the first 3 years I got hurt. And then I just crawled around and my mom carried me up and down. Like, she had a 6-month-old. So one of us was under each arm as she navigated these stairs. But we never lowered anything in the house. Like, my dishes were never lowered. I remember crawling up. My mom's like, I'm like, I want a glass of water. She's like, okay, go get it. And I've crawled up on this stool to get to the sink, and I like fell off of it. And she just looked down at me and she's like, are you okay? And she goes, I go, yeah. She's like, okay, get back up and do it again. And so my mom was that woman who just was like the rock, who's like, you're going to get bumped and bruises. You're going to get hurt. But at the end of the day, society's not going to change to be accessible for you. So figure it out.
Yeah.
And so I spent my whole life figuring it out.
Well, your mom raised an advocate, and that's beautiful. Can you share the story of how you were injured?
So my dad was a truck driver, construction worker. And so we lived on a dirt road and it needed to be graded. And he did it once a year, twice a year in general. And so we just thought it would be a fun, outing that you get in the road grader and you ride with your dad around the block and grade. And we just happened on this particular trip, there was like a big pothole in the road and the road grader only has one seat. And I was standing up next to my dad and the doors were open. And so when we hit it, I fell out of it. And then the back two wheels ran me over. And so I went face down in Michigan, we burn our leaves. And so I went down into like a burning pile of leaves. It was starting to smoke and it wasn't, which probably cushioned my fall a little bit. So when the road grader ran me over, it wasn't as hard, right? Like it had some give, but, my dad then picked me up cause when you do that, that's a panic situation. And, he picked me up and ran with me home. And then my mom called the hospital and said, I'm bringing my kid in. We just ran her over with a road grader and they just threw me in a car and we went to the hospital. And then that hospital didn't have a child unit. So then they put me on in an ambulance and took me to another hospital. And that's where they stopped internal bleeding and stuff before rehab and all that great stuff that happens with disability started. And
I mean, it's a breathtaking story. Do you remember anything?
Yeah, it's starting to fade a little bit over time because it was November 8th. So, my brother's, I call my brother up and say, how old are you? That's how many years I've been hurt. Right. It's his year of birth. So I'm always like, how old are you this year? And my mom has kept the shoes that I got ran over in, which is a really interesting way of, memorizing it and memorializing it. But, everybody does their own thing. Mm-hmm. But for me, I remember bits and pieces of it because, of course, you're in shock and then they knock you out for surgery. And so you kind of miss some parts of it. But it was really cool because we had my dad worked for construction. So the crane company would come and Santa would fly, and made it special, even though we were in that situation. So
what do you mean? Where were you when Santa was on a crane flying in the hospital?
Yeah. University of Michigan rehabilitation. Mm-hmm. Cause I was in rehab for 3 months after I got hurt. So I spent Christmas and Thanksgiving and everything in the hospital. And so hospitals try to make Christmas, the holidays festive. So they brought the big crane and had the bucket and then Santa and they had light up reindeer and, just try to make it the best of all the situations.
So you remember Santa flying on the crane?
Yeah. Those things that just stick in your brain. You have those memories that you hold on to. That's one of them. It was a pretty big impact in my life, but I don't really remember. I remember from my accident on, I don't really remember post or pre-accident. And I think that's because it's a mechanism that your body puts in to protect you. So I don't really know when I'm missing without walking. And I've had a really successful life without my legs. So it works out.
But by the way, you're probably right about just the brain sort of processing things and tucking things away. But I also don't really remember anything, before the age of 5. I've just barely got some fleeting memories of preschool. And then I have better memories of kindergarten. So I kind of don't have those 4-year-old memories either.
And it's you have memories though, right? Those good ones, when you're 7 or 10, you don't remember all of it, but you have that breakthrough memory.
Yeah. Okay. So you're in the hospital for 3 months. And you don't probably remember this, but I'm just always love to hear the parents' journey, the parents' reaction, how do they handle it? How did they get through this? Because it's just as traumatic for them as you. So what was their context? How are they handling it?
So I think it's actually more traumatic for the parents than it is the kid, right? Like, because kids we're bounce back pretty well. Like whatever, going back to what you said, whatever you tell us, we're going to believe, right? You're the adult, or you're the trusted person. You're our parent. If you say it's going to be okay, kids believe that it's going to be okay. My dad went into work and just worked a lot of hours, right? Like financially to afford it, but also, I think it helped with coping with it. And then my mom was the person that was at the hospital. Like my dad would stop by every day, but he had to work to keep, food on the table and a roof over our head. I think it was harder on my mom to find people to babysit my little brother while I was going through the journey. And so that was a big strain. I remember is like my mom, and at the time we had braces. I don't know if like those braces that go all the way up to your chest, right? And you lean to the left and it kicks out. You lean to the right and it kicks out, right? That's walking. And so my mom had like my brother in the stroller. She's pushing a wheelchair. She has the, walking equipment across it with crutches and stuff. And so my mom just became this like rock. And so she would cry behind closed doors. So I never knew at the time she was crying. We knew like at the beginning, in the day of the anniversary of the accident in the beginning, not so much now, it's been years and my family has coped with it well. But in the beginning, like the anniversary date was always a really hard date for her. And I wouldn't necessarily know. I now know when it is. And we call and we say, hey, today's the anniversary date, just kind of to have that conversation. But she, my mom was the rock that held it all together. And my dad had to cope with his own grief. My family was, when we talk about it, it's about the grief of the life that we thought my child would have.
Yes.
And I didn't have it. And I joke with my mom, I go, but I was never going to be that child anyway. Like she thought I'd be a dancer and a cheerleader. I was like, I was never going to be that child. So
Why?
You were going to be grieving anyway, because that's not who I am.
Why would you not have been a dancer or a cheerleader?
That's just not me. No. I just want to what I love about basketball right now is like I can ram people and, it's contact sport. And so I probably would have played soccer or, a forceful sport, but I was just like, Mom, that wasn't going to be me, even if I walked. So I'm glad we got that grieving over early.
So even if you didn't have your injury, she still would have been grieving the cheerleader you didn't become.
Right. And I mean, parents do this when kids go away to college, right? You think they're going to be doctors or lawyers or you want this. And then they tell you, no, I want to, do something different. And parents are like, but that's not who I thought my kid was going to be. And you have to grieve that. I'm like, it was just early in life. We just did it early. Yes.
Okay. Oh, so good. So fun. I want to meet your mom. I love these.
She's funky.
I love these parent stories.
Yeah.
Okay. So it feels like your mom was kind of the linchpin in your kind of getting back kind of on your feet, so to say, right? Kind of getting back in life. Were you able to integrate back into school? And you said earlier, I think before the show, you were maybe at the top of the show, you were the kind of only girl in a wheelchair at school. So you were able to kind of go back into school and kind of integrate somewhat with your, classmates.
Yeah. So in fifth grade, I transferred to our home school, but at that point in time in society, they had a magnet school that we would all go to if you had a disability. So for the first 3 years, I went to a magnet school, which had able-bodied kids, but we also had OT, PT. So we'd be taken out of class. So by fifth grade, they wanted to send me back in third grade. And I was like, I'm not ready. I don't want to leave. And then in fourth grade, so I did one more year it was POHI at that time, right? That's what it's called. But by fifth grade, I went to my school district homeschool and I was the only one there. And it took a lot, in Michigan, right? Snow on the playground isn't great. And them just plowing to get me into the building in middle school. We had portables because we outgrew our school. So in the back was the whole math department. So my mom had to advocate to get a math department or a math class inside because it was snowing and they wouldn't plow it. And then I was like, how do you expect me to get to this class?
Right.
there's snow, you can't get there. So we had to do kind of that advocating, middle
That's
school.
early days. I mean, that's elementary school.
Yeah. So I put a snowsuit on as an elementary school kid, and I would just crawl around the playground with the kids, because wheelchair wasn't helpful. And so that's what I did in elementary to play with my friends. And it's been interesting because parents now contact me and they're like, well, what do you do? Because the kids are all running around away from my kid with a disability. How do I make them inclusive of recess? And I was like, well, I found the swings, and I found things that were stationary that I could play on, and then other kids would play so they wouldn't run away from me. Right. And that's how I made it work. And then by 6th grade, I was just like the office assistant, because I just would go during my recess time and help the office, like staple papers or whatever. And then in middle school, the big thing was the fire drill, because it was a 2-story building. And so when a fire drill happens, you can't use the elevator. So how do you do that? Right. And so my big thing was I had to stand at the stairwell and wait for these teachers to come, and then they would carry me down. That was the safety protocol.
I mean, it's better than nothing.
Right. But that's how it changes over time, right? Like that's in the 90s, like just wait at the top of this stair and hopefully the teachers will come and get you.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. So I think we're moving into junior high, you're about some point, maybe even before junior high, you find adaptive sport, right?
Yeah. So by 7, I was doing track and road racing.
And how did you find adaptive sports? Because I love those stories because it's always so random.
Yeah. So Wright and Philippus was a big medical supply company in Michigan, and still is. And it might be larger, but usually it's in the Midwest. The person who owned that was a double amputee male who got ran over by a train and was on wooden legs.
What?
His name is Tony Philippus. And he refused to get like the next modification of prosthetics because like he had those so long. He was, in his late or early 70s at the time. He was an older man, and he's like, I'm not changing. I've walked on wooden legs all this time. I'm just going to do it. Right. And so he started the purse at the Detroit Free Press Marathon. So he was already like for the disabled athletes to come and push the marathon and it was one of the few marathons at the time that had money to come and participate in it.
That's cool.
Yeah. And so he had an employer, Jimbo Boyd, and he was a quadriplegic that he employee who worked with him. And we just came across them together. And so Jimbo was like, hey, she should get active in sports. And so in Michigan, we had a muscle series. And so what we did is we had road races that we picked from, and you got so many points if you participated in these. And then at the end of the year, you had a banquet. Well, we'd all pay dues. And so you'd win money at the end of the year. So it was this big network of people young, and I was the only kid. But there was a lot of adults, and we would just go from race to race every weekend.
But are these wheelchair athletes?
Yeah. All wheelchair athletes. Yep.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm. And so we the Crim race is the 10K that people kind of know now that they still do, but we would just go around, and then at the end of the season, we had a banquet, and it was like whoever the rookie of the year got $100 or whatever. And it just made it so that I had this social group, and we just kept going around, and it stuck. And then 2 years later, I think we figured out junior nationals. And so we had Michigan games that qualified you for junior nationals. And so New Jersey was the first junior nationals, and then Disney was the next year. Mm-hmm. And so we just got into that. And once you get into junior nationals, that's a whole new world that you didn't even know existed. I tell my friends, I go, disability sports is the underground railroad that no one knows about for disability. We talk about it in the civil rights movement, but once you get into it, it just opens up so much more support and understanding. But how do you find it? Right. Mm-hmm. How do you find it? And it's that one person in the parking lot. I'm that crazy person in a parking lot who will chase you down and be like, hey, there's these cool opportunities. You should be a part of it. Let me have your phone number.
Yeah.
Like, this lady. But that's how I found sports, and it just stuck. Like, and it was a sport. My mom worked a lot of hours. My dad worked a lot of hours to support us. So it was a sport that I could do around my neighborhood. So I could train around the block, right? I didn't have to go to a team or do anything traveling. And my mom could keep working and I could still compete.
That's really interesting story. And I do think, it's one of my favorite parts of these interviews is because it's all so unique and so different and so random, right? Like I always say, we got to take the randomness and sort of the luck out of finding adaptive sports. It can't be this secret, which it sort of is, to your point.
Right. And what happens when it becomes not a secret anymore and standard? Like, this population is going to grow so fast.
Oh yeah, I know. I can't wait. Okay. So take me through high school. Cause I think I feel like junior high and high school is hard for all of us. Those are not easy years. And then to have a disability and maybe be the only, kid in your school or whatever, probably makes it even harder. So talk to me about that. And really what I'm interested in too, is like the journey in self-confidence through those tough years.
So middle school was easier for me than high school because I had faculty on staff that really believed in me and wanted to bend over backwards. So I had 2 teachers who they were coaches of the track and field team. They let me be on the track team. We had an 8th grade class trip that was not going to be accessible to Washington, DC. And they volunteered to be responsible for me. So like buses, monuments, anything we did, they made sure that I could be included and they took sole responsibility for me, which is great. Like I had 2 teachers who had my back, who saw inclusion and said, this is what we're going to do, whatever it takes. So I got to go and be a part of the 8th grade class trip. And because those 2 faculty members made that stance, it really made it easier for me to be included because there was no excuse, right? Administrations, what are you going to say? When I got to high school, it was a lot more challenging because they wouldn't let me be a part of the track and field team. They saw me as a liability. And that was really where I was at my prime for track. I was an alternate for Sydney, and so like when you took away the track that's in the backyard, of your school, which was the easiest way you're going to train, it made it hard. But I never really I didn't go to a homecoming. I didn't go to a prom. I was in the marching band at school. And so I just was kind of I did a lot more of my sports without anybody knowing. Like no one at my high school they knew I missed a lot for traveling, but they didn't understand what I was doing. And it's really interesting now, years later on Facebook and social media, like how you see your high school friends connect with you. Cause you're like, you didn't really acknowledge me at all when I was in high school. But now that I'm like this Paralympic athlete and you see me going to Tokyo and Rio and London, now you're all like, oh, let's talk about it. And want to be friends and oh, I know her. And I'm like, you knew me. You don't know me, right? You knew my name. And so high school was really hard. I had 2 really good friends. They're still friends with me to this day. We still do stuff, but I just survived high school. I did do this event, Spend a Day in a Wheelchair. And we put it up to homecoming or prom, depending on when the school would allow me to do it. We brought 15 hospital chairs in. And for a week leading up to homecoming or prom, we would put 15 new students in them every day. And they'd have to spend the whole day in a wheelchair. Yep. And, then we brought in a wheelchair basketball team and we had them play during lunch hour against the people who were in the wheelchair. And then we did an assembly at the end of the week. And usually I'd pair it with another person or somebody who got hurt because of drunk driving, because you always have to tie it into educational purposes. Right. And so we had the mad car in the front of the school where, everybody has that during that time. And so for a week leading up to it, we did disability awareness and don't drink and drive and how you spin it at the time is because you could end up like me, right? Which probably isn't the greatest messaging at that time to say, oh, this is a bad life. You don't want it. But it also made it so my classmates understood there was only one accessible bathroom in the whole school. So when they had to go to the bathroom, they had to go and find which one was accessible for them to use, right? I wasn't going to tell them. And like, how do you navigate the library? And so for that, for that month, it brought more exposure and conversations in.
But is that just you taking this initiative and creating that program in high school?
Yep. Because I was frustrated. It was also the time in which they had baggy pants. So I knew every type of underwear that men could have because my eye line was all at their butts for all of high school. And I would go by and be like, please pull up your pants. Please pull up your pants. And they'd be like, what's the big deal? I'm like, because I'm sick of looking at all your butts all day long. And, it's just, I'm here and you guys are way up here. And so for me, like I tried to give a little part of myself to my classmates, but it was really hard because I remember my friend's mom, we were going to have a slumber party and she picked me up from school. And I said, you didn't tell her I was in a wheelchair. And she goes, I forgot, which is amazing, right? When your friends forget that you're in a wheelchair, it means that they're authentic friends. Yeah, but I also go, I'm going to sit on this curb and you take 5 minutes to go in there and talk to your mom about how this is going to be okay. And it's not going to be a big deal that I could get in her car. We're going to throw the chair in the back. And when I get to your house, it will be fine. I know how to crawl upstairs or whatever. But just that moment where her mom had that, that sheer look of panic a person has when they don't know you're disabled. And then they're like, how am I going to get this? My daughter has now said she's going to have this slumber party. And how am I going to get this kid in a wheelchair in my house that's 2 stories tall? Right. So,
oh my gosh.
But it's interesting, right? Like everything's a teachable moment. You just have to live life like that.
Very true. Very true. I'd like to take a quick break to show you how you can get involved as a volunteer with Angel City Sports.
Are you interested in supporting Angel City Sports? We're seeking volunteers to help organize clinics and events, as well as support our athlete outreach efforts, marketing and media, and even fundraising and development. All skill sets and backgrounds are welcome in support of our mission to provide free adaptive sport opportunities for children, adults, and veterans with physical disabilities or visual impairments. For our younger athletes, we welcome you to join the Angel City Youth Leadership Council. Middle and high school age students are eligible to join the Youth Leadership Council, where you will learn about the disabled community by working side by side with our athletes and acquire important skills such as teamwork, leadership, philanthropy, and event management. To sign up for our volunteer newsletter and stay up to date on all upcoming opportunities, visit angelcitysports.org.
So let's say you survive high school, right? As many do. But at some point, you've got your eyes set on college and you're going to use sports as a vehicle to help that dream happen. Talk to me about that, because I think that's also, you talk about this sort of secret of adaptive sports. There is this other secret that you can actually play some of these sports at the collegiate level. It's pretty cool.
Right. Well, so there's only 2 programs, right? There's University of Illinois and University of Arizona that basically do track. And still today, they're the only 2. University of Arizona was new, but the weather was amazing. And that was the thing, is like, if I was going to move away from my family, I didn't want to move to a climate that was just snow and ice again. And so Arizona, and it's a beautiful campus. It's, it's really accessible. I don't know if you've ever toured it, but it's a super accessible, super accommodating campus. And their faculty was super accommodating to understand that, like, I'm possibly going to miss weeks at a time, like a week or 2, to go and do this international competition. Are you willing to work with me? And they were at that time. Right. So I did like world championships. I did some junior national things, and like they worked with me. And so you just know that that's a right fit when somebody gets you, right? Like in high school, they didn't get me. Like they were like, oh, truancy is coming because you've missed too many days of school. And it's like, well, you don't provide the opportunity for me to participate in sports in school. So I have to go somewhere else to do it. And right. So, right. Like, how can you, when you don't provide the opportunity, how can you get mad when I find the opportunity to do it?
Yeah.
And so in college, I was on a good path for racing. I was an alternate for Sydney. And so I just was like, oh, I want to keep doing this.
What years are you in college? What
2000 through 2004 there.
Okay. Gotcha.
And so it was an interesting time because it was also the time. So I had back surgery when I was 16. So I have rods put in my back. So from neck to pelvis, I'm rotted.
Woo.
Yeah. I had really bad scoliosis. And so it was also a challenging time for me with racing because it was a different stroke. It was a little bit more painful. So when basketball came up at Arizona, I kind of jumped at it because it was something different, right? Like my body wasn't going to hurt so bad to try to do it. And so the reason I left track, I was pushing the marathon for USA, like as my sport or my event, but it was really because it was just getting painful. And so jumping women's wheelchair basketball just made sense. It was an indoor sport. And so I wasn't out in the rain anymore, but because I was like in London or in Tokyo, the rain was a killer for the track athletes and field athletes trying to do their events.
It was.
But we also were starting a women's wheelchair basketball program, and Arizona had said, look, we want to expand our sport opportunities. Would you be willing to help? And so I jumped on it, like it's something different. It's something to be a part of. It's something new, right? To push the disability sports movement forward. And the college was open to it. And so it's really hard to find colleges that are open to disabled sports. And so it's been really fun to watch Arizona over time expand and grow to all the different sports they're in. But so we took their 5 track athlete women and made a basketball team, and we were awful, but that program still exists today because I think our high score was like 13 points in one season because we were a bunch of track athletes. We were really fast, but couldn't figure out how to get the basket.
But wait, had you played basketball growing up? Not really.
Not at all. I refused to play. And the team now, like the people who grew up in Michigan at the time, were like, I can't believe that you're a Paralympic athlete in women's wheelchair basketball. We tried so hard to get you to play with us and you refused.
But what was in your head about it back then? Growing up?
I really liked being in an individual sport and just relying on myself because I was kind of, not that I was a loner, but I just didn't want to get disappointed by people letting me down. And in school, people were letting me down, right? Like I was constantly fighting just to be a member of normal day-to-day society at school. And you shouldn't have to do that in any school setting, right? Like inclusivity should be there no matter what you are.
So you're sort of burned by the high school experience, sort of wounded and sort of like, you're going to do your own thing and be accountable to yourself.
Right. And my mom, like, we just didn't have the ability to, like, the basketball team was an hour away, and resource wise and like transportation wise, like my mom works 12-hour days, and then they come home and try to like take me across the city, like just wasn't going to happen. What did your mom
do? Or what did she do?
She worked in a urology, which was really helpful growing up with a disability because I could just go see her doctor, right? Like I could just be like, hey, I'm going to come see you today. And so he was like willing to see me, but she worked as an assistant in a doctor's office. She did podiatry later, but she did urology when I was growing up. And so, she just worked in that doctor's office, and he had late hours on Tuesdays but driving, my mom drove 45 minutes to work every day, 45 minutes back. And so, and my parents got divorced when I was 9. And so, or 12, somewhere in there, I don't know. They got divorced. And so they, having only my mom at home and then my dad on the weekends, my dad was working a lot. My mom was working a lot just to provide, right? Like they were at a time where we're not wealthy. And so we did what we did to survive. And my mom like wanted me to be able to travel. And so to pay for plane tickets, right, to like go to these races, because you're traveling to Bloomsday and Peachtree and all over the place, and you're 16 years old, and you have a mom, and then my brother's coming because it's just a lot of money wrapped up in hotels and transportation. So she worked really hard so I could have the opportunities to do to be successful. She sacrificed a lot for me.
Well, we'll dedicate this episode to your mother. That's great. That's really cool journey in how you sort of found basketball kind of later, right? I mean, most of these the elite athletes, they find the sport a lot earlier because it's hard. It's hard to get to that elite level. So I know there's a whole journey of making a team and not making a team and all that. I want to hear that. But before that, just give me a little insight into what has been driving your educational journey. So I was raised by academics, PhD, professors, basically. Both my dad and stepdad are PhD economists. So so I have a lot of appreciation for the route you've taken, but like, why? Like, what was the?
That was not the plan at all.
It wasn't planned at all.
At all. So my dad doesn't have a high school diploma.
Okay.
And my mom graduated with just a high school diploma, no college. I'm the first one in my family to get a college education. My brother did trade school, and he works for, he did a NASCAR tech school. And so he learned how to, and is very successful. He does the pit crew for drag racing. My brother does like so many cool things, cause he's so mechanical, and my dad was, got his mechanical certificate and stuff. So for me, like with a disability, you don't in some ways have a lot of options. When you're in a wheelchair, people make a lot of judgments about what you can and can't do in terms of employment. And so first, that was the only real avenue I had. And I wanted to do sports, and it was a way for me to continue doing sports every day and get an education. And my parents had always been like, you're getting educated because this is how much we're struggling, because we haven't gotten those degrees.
Yeah.
So when I got my master's, I planned on getting the master's because I got a psychology degree, and no one told you at the time that a psychology degree doesn't mean anything if you don't have a PhD in it. So when you go out to get hired as an undergraduate psychology degree, it's really hard. So that's when I came to social work. Well, I broke my rods during my social work degree, and had to have emergency back surgery. I needed to stay on my dad's health insurance because it is cheaper to pay for semester and masters and stay on it than to pay for the back surgery and find insurance, right? Because insurance is so costly. So I went and got a PhD so I could stay on my dad's health insurance so that I could get emergency back surgery.
Are you kidding me?
I got a PhD.
That is the funniest story ever.
The decisions you make based on healthcare.
Wow. I mean, honestly, I have a friend of mine from the UK was here for a couple of years in San Francisco, and he ended up leaving because he was just like, I can't do this healthcare system. I need to get back to the UK. It's too hard. I think he has a quad. As a quad, he's just like, this is impossible. Yeah. Our system. So, wow, that's such a good story. Okay. So have you fallen in love with academia, with teaching, yes, with research? Like, what part of it sort of it excites you? And I know you teach a lot of cool classes too.
So I don't do research because I'm an assistant professor in practice. So I'm not tenured track, I'm non-tenured track. And that is so that I could keep doing the Paralympic side of it. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to do research and grant writing for a university and then be like, hey, I want to train for the Paralympics. And by the way, I'm going to take all this time off to go to training camps. Right. So like academia has been really supportive of that, where like, I don't have to teach in the summer, right? I have to teach fall and spring. I choose to teach in the summer because I figured out how to make it work, but it also, not teaching in the summer allows me to do Paralympics, right? Mm-hmm. Allows me to do training at the level that I want to do it. Mm-hmm. And so that has been a career that has helped me do that and be really flexible and still be able to do Paralympics. But I really didn't know how much I enjoyed learning. Like I always want to learn new things. Like I will go down that rabbit hole where like, I'll Google one thing and then the next thing 2 hours later, I'll be like, oh, I'm really far down this rabbit hole that I did not anticipate going down. And I just really enjoy just like learning in general. And so like, there's a lot of classes that I'm like ASL, like I totally want to go take ASL, but I'm like, probably not a great time in my life to do this. And so I fall down that trap a lot. But I do right now really enjoy academia because I can change youth's life and even adults that are older that are coming back to school now. Like I have an impact in how you view life. Right. And I know like you shouldn't say like, oh, as a professor, you're teaching everything like open-ended and people make their choice. But how you teach it is like people are going to love it more or hate it more. You know, like there's all this personality that goes into it. But I like to have the conversations about disability from somebody who's actually disabled, instead of having able bodies talk on my behalf all the time and be like, oh, well, this is what we think disability should look like, or this is what you need to do in society. Well, no, let me just tell you from a person who lives it every day, this is how you should act.
Yeah.
And so it's been really, like, for advocacy, it's opened doors for me to be able to now have students where I could be like, oh, you see this as an issue, go tell somebody, because they'll listen to students more than they'll listen, so I have influence in ways that I didn't have as a child to change what my life looks like. And mine, like, it's like the butterfly effect, right? Like, I only have 120 students every semester, but those 120 students are talking to their parents and their friends and career, right? So like, it's slowly changing the impact of how disability is viewed in the United States. And I just say, like, I'm doing my little part. And it's like, do you know the starfish story? Where you throw one in and you made a difference to that one life. And that's what I tell my students. I was like, look, you're not going to be able to change the world, but you can make a difference to people's lives. And so I'm trying to give you tools to change how disability is viewed and how you treat somebody with a disability. And so that's like really why I really enjoy doing it.
Yeah. That's great. Well, I'd love to have you come out to the games, because I think there's probably lessons that you've learned in teaching people, formally and informally, that we could kind of incorporate into like volunteer training and things like that. I mean, we have Candace Cable locally, so we have a kind of a legend who helps us a lot on accessibility and some of this stuff. But I think there's, anytime you're doing anything with a non-disabled person, it's a teachable moment. So I think that's a really nice way to think about it.
Let me tell you a fun Candace Cable story.
Yes.
And Candace probably doesn't even know this. So when I was racing as a young kid, she gave me one of her leotards when I was young, and being like, as my role model. So it's fun. I still have her like little leotard from years ago, because I have like a memorable, like, from when I did track. And so that's my Candace Cable story. She gave me her leotard from like a Paralympic event. Oh,
wow. That's pretty cool. Yeah. She's amazing. Okay, great. No, thanks for explaining it. And I love what you do. I love your advocacy. I love that you're in academia. And it's cool that you've kind of found a way to make it work for you. Let's talk about the Paralympics a little bit. So when did it sounds like, so you were close to making the team for Sydney, or an alternate. Did you get to go to Sydney, or you didn't get to go? They didn't call you?
No.
Okay. Gotcha. So you go, right? So, but when do you that's sort of, then you're starting to make transition to basketball. So at some point you start to realize, do you think, oh, I could make the team for basketball? Like, when does that thought hit you?
So I thought in 2006 I was like, okay, I could probably make it. I'm a class 1. I can, get in here. In 2008, I thought for sure I was making that team. Like, I was at tryouts. I had an amazing tryout. I thought it was going to be it. People there at the tryout, like the girls at the tryout who were going to make the team, like the starting lineup was like, you've had an amazing tryout. You're going to make the team. So then when they named off our names and my name was not on there in 2008, that was devastating, because I thought for sure that was the year I made it.
Okay. But what happened? Why do you think you didn't make it that year?
I wasn't ready. I think, they wanted to see more body of work. Like, could I do it consistently? Not just at that moment. And there was, other girls that had more experience going into Paralympics. Like, Paralympics year is always a hard year to jump on a team in a sport, in any sport, right? Because the people who are selecting you don't know how you're going to handle the pressure. And so they would prefer that you start like at a world championship or a Paralympian. And I think that's in any sport. It's hard to put your money on a rookie that you've never seen before, to put on a team in 2008. And at that time,
for the individual sports, though, they have to do that more because they set the selection criteria. So they can't really, disqualify someone from a team just because they're young, as long as they meet all the criteria. But I think your point is well said, which is it probably benefits everyone to come in a little earlier before the Paralympic year, because it's a stressful year. It's a totally different.
Right. And it's not impossible, but it's just more of an uphill battle than if you try to, now is the perfect time to join in the Paralympic
right.
pipeline.
So you're devastated after not making the team in 08. What did you learn from that experience?
To just keep trying, like that was like, if you really wanted, I think me being on the Paralympic team right now is so much sweeter because I had to work so much harder than like normal people, not normal, but like I had to work hard to make the team. And our pipeline was so big at that time. And we had so many athletes, not to say anything against like right now, but our pipeline isn't as many people like with IWBF cards. We have like 16, right?
So the pipeline back then was bigger, more full of athletes than it is today.
Yeah. At that level.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And I think that's kind of sad. I don't know what happened, but we'll do our part out here on the West Coast. But okay. So
it taught me grit. It taught me like when you get knocked down, like I kind of knew that previously, but when you get knocked down, like get back up more fierce. Like if you really want it, like,
yeah,
I had to invest more time into it, more effort, weightlifting became more of an issue at that time because I needed to get stronger, like there was just things I thought I was ready and I probably wasn't ready. Like, it's funny now because I go back and I watch 2012 film when I was in London and I tell the coaches, like, I'll call them up and be like, I can't believe you ever played me. I sucked in 2012. Like, I was like, I missed layups. I missed all sorts of stuff. And they're like, but you fit well in that team and the chemistry. And like, at that time it was great, but like, I'm such a perfectionist. So now that I'm in 2020 and I'm going back and like looking at 2012 film, I'm like, oh, this is horrible. This is so embarrassing.
Okay. So you don't make the 2008 team. You make a world championship team in 2010, right?
I got 30 seconds of playing time that whole week.
Are you serious?
Yep.
Oh my gosh. And then you stay on the team through the London games, right? And the team comes in fourth in London, right? Yes, it was heartbreaking. So, tell me about that.
So I don't know if there's a conspiracy around that team. So in the semifinal game, we don't really talk about it that much, but we lost to Australia, and it was a bad call by a ref. So Rose Hollerman hit went up for free throw. She missed it. It came, and then she got her own rebound and then went in for a layup. I don't know. Something happened. Elena Nichols grabbed it after it hit the rim. So the shot clock should have started over. It didn't. And so they said it was a violation. And so we lost by 1 point, even though Elena hit the layup and we should have been up by 1 point. And so Australia got to go to the gold medal game and we went to the bronze medal game, and we just couldn't get out of that funk from that semifinal game. Like, that was just, you could just tell that, we talk about being competition matured, and we weren't, we weren't ready to brush off the devastation from the semi. And the bronze medal game, I don't care what anybody says, it is the hardest game to play, because gold medal game, it's great. You get a medal either way. Bronze medal, everybody's fighting for that medal, right? Like, it's just
are you telling me you think the bronze medal game is a harder game to win than the gold medal win?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Mentally, yes, totally.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
I've never heard that. It makes sense, but I've never heard anybody say that.
Yeah. Well, in winning bronze this year and winning gold in 2016, like, gold wasn't easy, right? Like, the game is still challenging. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, it's still a challenging game. There's still pressure on it, but like the bronze, like, oh, I'm still going to get a medal out of this. So this is such a great, you don't want to be fourth place. You just don't want to be fourth. It's the most devastating place, because it's like, I'm one out of the medal. I still was in that game. Like, it's just a hard place to be. And so like, we're in the locker room in 2020 being like, we are not having what happened in 2012 again. Like, we're getting this medal, like trying to like get over the hump of what happened in the semifinal game. Like, Natalie and I and Rose, who'd been there before, were like, no, we're not doing this again. Like, that's not a good feeling. We're going to win the bronze. And so just to be able, because mentally it's so hard to come out of the devastation of not being in the gold medal game and then be up enough to win a bronze medal game.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the hardest game. I don't care what anybody says.
Oh, it's so good. This is so good. That makes sense. I just had never really thought about it. So did you have any unique mental health challenges this year, keeping yourself in the game, trained, ready for Tokyo? Was this a harder year for you?
I think last year was a harder year for me than this year.
Okay.
Because
just the disappointment and
I was ready to be done in 2020. Like, I hadn't even thought about competing in 2024. Like, I had planned that 2020 was.
You were going to retire.
Yeah, I was going to be done. And so when we did a whole nother year, I'm old. When we're doing a whole nother year that I hadn't in my life thought about yet, right? Like, I just hadn't thought about it. And so that was really hard to stay motivated to be like, I thought I was going to be done in 2020. This is what I planned my life to be. And I've learned over time not to be a planner. Like, when you plan your life out, it never works out the way you think it's going to be. And so you just got to take it moment by moment. And I knew that, right? Like, I knew that, but COVID hit. We were sitting inside a lot more. So I have an elementary school across the street. They took the nets down. They locked it up. Like, they didn't want people playing. They took backboards down in some of the location, or the rims off, so that people wouldn't play. And so we were really locked down for a little bit. And we just all looked at each other and we're like, what are we going to do? Like, how do you train for a sport? Like, track, you could get on a road anywhere. It's not ideal, but you can still get your endurance and what you have to do.
Yep.
Pools, you can jump in somebody's pool in their backyard, but basketball, like, how do you, when they're taking rims off, you're really at a disadvantage. You
need to know like a super rich person that has a court in their backyard or something.
I did not. And those super rich people think that wheelchairs are going to damage their floor and won't let you in there anywhere, right? Like, rec center, how many times have you answered that question? Like, the wheelchairs are really not going to ruin your floors.
Yes.
I was like, the kids chewing gum is going to ruin your floor more than these wheelchairs are, but
so that's really interesting. I feel like the delay helped a lot of the younger athletes get a little more mature. Absolutely. And then it probably hurt those at the kind of on the other side of it, the other end of their careers. So it's interesting.
And we lost like Becca Murray because she was done. Right. So she's like, I can't do another year. And we lost some other girls because of just the longevity. It did help with our team chemistry though, because we were doing virtual weightlifting sessions in our home. Right. Like, Katie is a wonderful strength and conditioning coach. She figured out okay, you can do this to keep working on this muscle at your home. So we were doing workouts with just bands and cans of soup and jugs of 5 liters, we got real creative, and we did bi-monthly calls so that we can, keep the motivation up. But I just didn't plan on going another year. And so that was a challenge for me. But then I just got rejuvenated once everything opened up and they're like, okay, Tokyo's. And then that's the other part with Tokyo is you didn't know if it was really going to happen. So training.
So true, right? Man, the rumors were swirling all summer long. We're a few weeks away and people are saying, is it really going to happen? I'm like, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. A month out, people were like, are you sure? And I'm like, well, once the Olympians happened, I was like, they have to, for equality, they have to put the Paralympics. We can't say the Olympics are going to happen and the Paralympics aren't. That was my mantra.
I know, but what I was worried, I agree with you sort of from a, kind of optics standpoint, that looks really bad. But I also was worried that the Olympics was such a mess with COVID. And if their COVID protocol didn't, do what it was intended to do, that they would cancel the Paralympics just out of health concern. So I actually thought that was a concern coming from the Japanese government more than the organizers. So,
and I think it was interesting too. Even though the 48-hour rule devastated a lot of people, you had to be out after 48 hours. We're a sport that did the whole thing. But I also think that it made it so, I hate to say this, the Olympians couldn't get in much trouble, and because it kicked them out as soon as their events were over. So they weren't sitting around causing problems for that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Paralympians are much better behaved.
We are much better behaved. But
all right. So has it rejuvenated you enough that you're not retiring?
I haven't made that decision yet. Trooper texts me like, are you still staying? Like everybody, then NWBA, are you still staying? I'm leaning more on staying right now. I think for the movement and the growth of women's wheelchair basketball, we need some of our veterans to stick because we're a really young team. Mm-hmm. This was the youngest in the history of USA basketball that we've ever taken. I think the average age was 22, which is a young team to take to basketball, right? Because there's just a lot of maturity that comes with the game over time. And, nothing against these players have been playing for 10 years. Like, don't get me wrong. They've been playing since they're 5. They've put their time into the sport, but there's just a different level between juniors and adults, and your body's changing. And like with women, you go through puberty a little bit later and muscle development and stuff. And so, they're still learning their bodies. The girls are amazing. Like, I had so much fun with them. I love them. It was a really fun team to be a part of. But it's also hard to like, be like, okay, we're just going to leave you, as a veteran player, be like, you're still really young. You have one, I think they're ready to take the lead. Not that they're not ready to take the lead, but I think it'd be better after 2024 because they've matured a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But it's also, and this is how people keep trying to keep me in the sport. They're like, it's only 2.5 more years. Really, if we really look at like the time you have another competition and the time Paralympics happen, it's 2.5 years. It's not a 4 quad like you're used to. So it's always really interesting when people's trying to negotiate, like, are you going to stay or not?
Yeah.
I have to make a decision in the next few weeks because, in January, we start usually selections and stuff. I don't know. I'm still playing. I haven't been in my chair since Tokyo. I've really taken time for myself and not training and letting my body heal. Just because you have to take time off. Like, I think in any sport right now, it's really hard because you guys are coming up. We're all coming up to World Championship and qualifiers again next year, right? And we're usually having that year off and we don't have it. So I took this time off.
Yeah. Well, call me if you want somebody to brainstorm with on this. Tough decision. I don't know that I have any easy.
Well, I'm 39.
Whatever. I just turned 50.
Yeah, but China Paralympics at this. It's hard to keep up. It's hard to keep up with these youngins.
I know. I surf. My thing is surfing, and I surf with mostly. There's like usually just a bunch of 20-year-olds out there. I'm like I'm like the grandfather out there, which is kind of funny.
It's fun.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit before we jump into the final section, which is our soul searching section. I want to just hear a little bit about your take on the topic of inspiration porn and ableism, and I think what I'm most interested to hear from you, Darlene, is, what does society need to understand about this, right? What does society need to understand about the disability journey? And maybe also what does the media in particular need to understand about disability? Because I know you're a real advocate and you have some great, strong opinions about these topics, but what's your take on where do we need to go when it comes to this inspiration porn topic?
I think we need to see people with disabilities as just normal people in society. And we tend to treat them patronizing in some ways or our feel-good stories, right? Like when we look at the news, the lead story is that some able-bodied kid took some person with a disability to prom or some, and we videotape that and it's like, well, just do that. Do that because you're a good person and you want to do it. Don't call the news to say you're doing it. Like, I don't have a problem with you taking somebody to prom with a disability. I have a problem with how you're presenting it, right? Like, you shouldn't do it because you're going to get a news story out of it. You should do it because you're a good person and you want to take a person to prom. And how we put it in the media is like, oh, look at this really good person who's doing it. Why is that a really good person for including me with a disability?
Yeah.
Like, I'm a human being. And it's this is a little off track, but when we talk about like sex education, right? We don't give it for people with disabilities because we don't think they're sexual beings. Mm-hmm. And so when we like talk about inspirational porn and everything, we take away all of the day-to-day human necessities that everybody has. And just because I have a disability doesn't mean that I don't have those same thoughts and feelings of wanting to be included. And I want to have a family and I want to have children and I want to have all this, like, just because I'm disabled and sitting in a wheelchair doesn't mean I don't want that. But society in our media is like, well, when we kind of go to dating or whatever, it's like, oh, look at the cute little disabled people together. You know, like when we're just like pushing around with wheelchair people, it's like, oh, are you in a race? Why do we don't say when two like walkies are walking next to each other, oh, are you racing each other? Like, you just don't say that.
If you're just saying you're like going to dinner or going down the street with someone else in a chair, it's like, that must be some special event that you two are out in public.
Right. Like, and I don't want, like, this is my big thing, because like I have had in Texas is so great, right? We do like, bless your heart. Bless your heart means, oh my gosh, I feel so sorry for you. It doesn't mean like this, like, oh, it's not a real blessing. But then they'll come back and be like, oh, I want you to be my good deed for the day. So can I help you like load your groceries or something? And so I think like, you know, especially when you go to church on Sunday, we see people wanting to like trip over themselves to help people with disabilities, because it was like, oh, how do we, you know, we got the message of the Lord today and now we got to go implement it. And so I just think like inspirational porn, you know, patronizing and using people with disabilities to make ourselves feel better as able-bodied people. Not that I'm able-bodied, but they do. And it's all the wrong reasons. Like, I want you to see me as a Paralympic athlete and that I work hard just as hard as an Olympic athlete. And I don't want it to have any caveat or parentheses around it that says, oh, because they're in a wheelchair, they were able to succeed at this. Like, or,
oh, you're so right on that. And I'm starting to coach like producers in the media about this before, you know, Ezra, my son, or others get featured, that, you know, if we're profiling someone, because the sort of the common structure, right, for the media is this thing happened, and despite all of that, they achieved something. And it's like, no. It's not despite. It's not despite. It's, yeah, that happened and they achieved these amazing things, but it's not despite. It's right. You would never say, oh my gosh, Darlene's a college professor despite being a woman. Right. Or despite being a person of color. So you would never say that. But for some reason, disability, we get that despite the disability, right? Or overcame the, you know, whatever to do these things. Right.
Yeah. And it's so frustrating, because it's like, can we just not present us as like, I just want to run down one time of like basketball in the news, right? Like, here's the scores of the game, and they're just wheelchair basketball players, right? Or like, but we always have to have these parentheses or this asterisk next to whatever we're doing. And it's just so annoying. Like, can we, and when society, like the UK, right? Like when I went to London, it was amazing because we had 24-hour film coverage of Paralympics. We were on all the billboards. They had a comedy show every night that like made fun of us, which was great. Like, you think that people are like, oh, you're making fun of disabled people. First off, it was disabled people making fun of disabled people, because we know it's not really tactful for able-bodied people to make fun of us, but it still is funny from time to time. We have to be honest, but if done in the right way. But we had this comedic show every night that was making fun of like things that happened at the Paralympic. And it was like, we're finally at the same level as able-bodied people, right? Like Jay Lewis would make fun of an able-bodied person, but like we made disability non-touchable because they're disabled. And like to see London step up and really do that was amazing, because it's like, you have enough respect for us as human beings and part of integrated into society that you will do that. And so inspirational porn, like people don't even, it's instead of inspirational porn, it's like aggressions, right? Like that people don't really know that they're doing, but they're doing. And you're just like, and it's been really interesting because month of October is National Employment Disability Awareness Month, right? So like I get a lot of phone calls to come and do presentations, and it's because they want to hear your story. And I didn't really think about it in this way until recently. A disabled advocate put it out there, and they said, we're asking somebody to relive the most traumatizing part of their life day in and day out for our benefit of learning about disability, right? So when do we get past that? We're like, you are bringing me in because I'm in academia and I am, like educated and doing good things and not having to tell my backstory. Have you watched the Stella Young, I'm Not Your Inspiration? Have you watched that TED Talk?
Mm-hmm.
And I love it when she says, yes, this was the first time like a student like just saw me as a teacher, like, but they kept being like, where's that inspirational story that you're going to talk, when you're going to do your thing? And I'm like, that's where I think we think of people with disabilities is when are you going to do your thing instead of when do you just get a seat at the table because you're an expert in whatever we're asking about. Yep. And so inspirational porn kind of takes away from that ability to ever have that conversation because we're just used as inspiration and overcoming and despite instead of like what we're really achieving and changing.
Right. That's beautiful. It's not the same, but it's kind of related to a topic that we covered on a prior show, which is a fellow Paralympian on the U.S. team, Dana Mathewson, she on the tennis team. So she talks about having to sort of, people sort of expect her to be really like, right. Like there's this expectation, and she knows she sort of has to be up and positive and this and that. And so she talks about kind of how tiring that is, that, because she's a Paralympian, because of all her accomplishments, there's sort of this really, and it's funny because I'm like, well, that's like, I know I'm going to get a smile when I run into you. Like, I know you're, so it's funny. The flip side of that is it is exhausting to have to sort of live at this level, just sort of this expectation that society is sort of dumped on, people. So yeah, it's like super strange to me just to think about all these, they're really just sort of misconceptions and prejudices, right? That we've formed over the years that create.
And we want to use us like to educate, but that yet we don't want to like make buses accessible, right? Like that's my big thing too, is like, you want us to come and talk to you about how to employ people with disabilities, but are you really going to employ us or is this just a month topic? Like.
Totally. No, you're right.
Is this a check box in your diversity and inclusive, strategic plan this year? Is this just how you're checking it off, or are you really going to live it?
Well, I went down this path for years, trying to get big companies to bring either me or Angel City in to help them, with their programs to help hire more people with disabilities. And man, they always say the right thing. And then when it came to like implementing anything, they wouldn't do anything. So right. I kind of gave it up. It was too frustrating. But okay, soul searching. Are you ready?
Yeah.
This is rapid fire.
Okay.
Fun or interesting fact that I do not know about you.
I play the Nintendo Switch and virtual reality quite often.
Bam, like that. What has your disability taught you?
Nothing's impossible.
Okay. What have you learned about self-acceptance?
I'm still working on it. I'm accepting of my disability. I just have really high expectations of me as a human being. So just being enough, right? Like I always want to do more. Like even on the boards that I sit on, I'm like, what am I not doing? What am I doing? And they're like, you're doing enough. And I'm like, I just always want to do more. So I think self-accepting, like just me being is enough. And I don't need to keep striving for more.
Okay. Man, I should have asked you that question earlier. Dig into that one. What have you learned from your mistakes?
Leave them in the past and do better in the future.
Okay. What brings you stress?
The disability movement. I just want young kids to be able to be accepted without any asterisks and striving to make it better for them. And so like, are we doing enough? Where can we do better? I'm one person. Everybody jump on my ship and help me.
Yes. Yeah. If we had hundreds or maybe a couple thousands of you around the country, we'd be in a lot better shape. What accomplishment are you most proud of in your life so far?
The women's wheelchair basketball camp that was completely free is probably my one that I hold dearest to.
Oh, I'm so stoked you said that. we didn't even get to go into that too much, but okay. A life philosophy, and if you don't have one, a quote or a saying that you kind of live by.
So be the change you want to see in the world. Be the difference maker. Like I live by the thing, I'm not going to ask anything of anybody else that I'm not willing to do myself. So if I'm asking you to clean a bathroom, I'm going to be right there next to you cleaning the bathroom. And I think too often times when we get in different leadership positions, we're like, oh, those are beneath me, and nothing's ever beneath anybody. And so keeping that level playing field.
The problem is if you clean all the toilets, then you don't have time to do the higher level advocacy. So you got to be careful there.
True. But I also have to show people that I'm willing to do it.
Very true.
So that in the
next year, you got to find the balance, because I'm there.
I'm not good at saying no either. So that's hard for me.
I'm not either. Gosh. No, it's a, and
people know that about me. And that's why I get emails of like, will you do this?
It's almost a sickness. For me, it's a problem. I got to work on that. Okay.
Oh, I can tell you, no is a sentence. That's what somebody has told me recently. No explanation needed. No is a sentence.
You're full of good little clips and little one-liners here. I like that. It almost sounds like a t-shirt.
Yeah. Well, they said like when we do it like self-help or not self-help, like self-care with social work, other faculty have been like, no is a sentence, Darlene. No. You don't have to say no because I don't have time. No is the sentence.
Oh gosh, that's good. I need to learn that one. Okay. Wrapping it up. Anything that we haven't covered, you want to say, anyone you want to acknowledge, anything, the microphone is yours.
Get active, get off the sidelines and into sports, and share the movement with other people. Like if you have a friend, we have bring a friend along days, and, educate people, like be willing to have those hard conversations. I think that we don't have, and walk up to that random person in a parking lot and ask them to play sports. That's how we find most people.
So true. And what's the best way for people to follow your journey?
So any social media platform, it's just Darlene Hunter. And if not, you could Google my name plus wheelchair basketball. Probably my phone number and email is everywhere right now. Fortunately, I guess. So you can find me if you just do Darlene Hunter plus wheelchair basketball. All of those things will come up.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I worry when our emails and phone numbers are all over the web, but I guess it's necessary. Okay. So to wrap up the show, from the deepest recesses of my heart, thank you for jumping on and sharing your story. And I think you're an incredible human being, and you're such a blessing to the adaptive sports movement in general. So I hope you will, just kind of keep doing what you're doing, and certainly know you have a friend and partner in Angel City out west to support anything you're doing. And what I love about you too, Darlene, is like you're so much more than an athlete. Like you're really, you've been an advocate your whole life, it sounds like. And so that's really cool. I mean, your mom trained you well from those early days, and now you're a professor. I mean, you're just so cool, so dynamic. So just a real treat for me to dig a little deeper into your story. So thank you.
It was fun talking to you. It was different. I love it.